All right, let's dive right in. We're going way back, all the way to the 14th century, to get into an intellectual puzzle that, believe it or not, still echoes today. It really messes with how we think about reality itself. And right at the center of it all is a philosopher named Johannes Sharpe, who came up with this just brilliant solution to a problem that had philosophers completely stumped. This whole massive philosophical showdown, it really starts with a question that sounds kind of simple on the surface, but is just incredibly deep. When we use a word like humanity, are we actually talking about something real? Some kind of essence that all humans share? Or is it just a handy label we made up to group together a bunch of different individuals, like you, me, and Socrates over there? So to really get a handle on this, we've got to understand the key term here, universals. These are just those general ideas or properties we talk about all the time without even thinking. So you see a red stop sign, a red shirt, a red car. Redness is the universal that links them all. The multi-million-dollar question, though, is where does that redness actually exist? And that one question, where does redness exist? It literally split the philosophical world in two. It created these two warring camps with totally different ideas about how reality works. On one side, you had the realists, and on the other, the nominalists. Okay, so the big difference comes down to this. For the realists, the world comes kind of pre-sorted. Categories like humanity or animal or real things, out there in the world, whether we notice them or not. But for the nominalists, that was total nonsense. These said those are just names, nomina, which is Latin for names. For them, there's just a bunch of individual things, and we are the ones who create the categories in our heads. So, into this high-stakes intellectual cage match steps the legendary philosopher William of Ockham. And he didn't just show up to chat. He came locked and loaded with a logical argument so sharp, so powerful, that our sources call it a devastating criticism. It basically threatened to blow the whole realist worldview to bits. Occam was incredibly crafty. He basically set a logical trap using the realists' own ideas against them. He said, okay guys, let's take your argument seriously for a second. You say a universal, like human nature, is a single thing and it's truly 100% identical with every single person. And at this point, all the realists are like, yep, sounds right to us. And snap, there's the trap. Occam says, well, if that's true, if human nature is the exact same thing in Socrates and in Plato, then that one single thing has to be both short, like Socrates, and tall, like Plato. It has to be sitting in Athens and standing in Thebes. It has to be both things at once, which is, of course, a complete and total paradox. It's absurd. This, right here, was Occam's checkmate. It was his killer question. All of a sudden, the realists were stuck. They were backed into a logical corner, and they had no good answer. Their entire philosophy seemed to depend on something that was basically impossible. And this wasn't just some small academic hiccup. The source material is very clear. Occam's argument sparked a full-blown crisis. It made the realists face the fact that their classic explanation, their whole account, was, and I quote, unacceptable. They had to go back to the drawing board. Big time. But they didn't just pack it in and go home. A group we now call the Oxford Realists decided to take on the challenge. And their most original thinker, Johannes Sharpe, came up with an absolutely brilliant way out of Occam's logic trap. It required a whole new way of thinking about what it even means for two things to be the same. And here it is. This is Sharpe's secret weapon, the heart of his third way. He argued that a universal, like humanity, and an individual person, like Socrates, are, get this, really identical, but formally distinct. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Wait, isn't that a flat-out contradiction? And yeah, it sounds like one. But just stick with me here, because this is where it gets really cool. This old medieval idea can feel a little abstract, so let's use a modern analogy that makes it all click into place. Just think about Clark Kent and Superman. Are they the same person? Well, the answer is kinda yes and kinda no. And that yes and no is exactly what Sharpe was talking about. So first, let's talk about real identity. At the most basic physical level, Clark Kent and Superman are the same guy. One body, one mind. If you did a DNA test, it would come back as a perfect match. Their fundamental reality, their actual being, is one and the same. They are really identical. But, and this is the absolute key, they are formally distinct. They have different properties, different jobs, different descriptions that are true about them. So, the statement Clark Kent is a reporter is true, but the statement Superman is a reporter, that's false. Their formalities, the definitions and rules that apply to them, are different, even though the underlying guy is the same. And that is Sharpe's genius solution. He's saying that humanity and Socrates work in the exact same way. They're really identical. Socrates is an instance of humanity, but they are formally distinct. The statement, humanity is a species, is true, but Socrates is a species? Of course not, that's false. And just like that, with this clever distinction, Occam's paradox just evaporates. It's solved. So what's the upshot of all this? What did this solution actually accomplish? Well, it created a much, much more nuanced and sophisticated way of looking at the world. Sharpe didn't just rescue realism, he upgraded it. He created a middle path that took the best insights from both camps. You see, what makes Sharpe so great is that he wasn't some rigid dogmatist. He actually listened to the nominalists. He saw the power in their arguments and understood that, yeah, language isn't just a perfect mirror of reality. He got that our thoughts and our words have their own set of rules that are partly separate from how the world works. And his system gave him the tools for all that complexity. He could say a term like humanity is properly common, meaning it really does point to a real shared nature out there. But he could also explain a word like chimera, the mythical beast. We all know what it means, but it's less proper. It points to a concept that's real in our minds, but not a real thing in the world. His system was flexible enough to handle the true messiness of language. So in the end, what's Sharpe's legacy? He essentially created Realism 2.0. He showed that you could totally believe that universals are real, but without being naive and thinking every single general word we use has to point to a real thing. By recognizing the complexity of language, he built this crucial bridge between the two camps, creating a third way that was actually stronger and smarter than either side was on its own. And that leaves us with this one last, really provocative thought. This 700-year-old debate, it is so far from being just ancient history. When we talk today about categories in science, in society, in our own identities, we're still grappling with the exact same puzzle Sharpe was. Which of these big ideas are real, built into the fabric of the world, and which are just incredibly powerful, incredibly useful fictions that we've created with our own minds? The puzzle, it seems, continues.